Hey everybody, thank you very much for checking out the first lesson in the political science video blog series here at Politics with Roger. The content that we're going to cover today, I promise you, will be relevant to every single lesson I teach at this point here on out in regards to political science. The reason is what we're covering today, power, and more specifically power, influence, and authority, is relevant in every conversation and every study that you will have regarding political science. And the reason that is because politics is the exercise of power. Let's break down these two definitions just to start with real quick so we get an idea. Out of Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the definition for power is the right or means to command or control others. And the definition for politics is of or relating to government, a government, or the conduct of government. Well, whenever a government does anything, they are exercising power. They are exercising the right or means to command or control others. So you cannot separate politics from power. It's impossible. But when we really look at what power is, and I know it's a taboo subject to some people don't like talking about it because when people perceive power, they're often perceiving naked power, which is pretty much what a bully does, pushing people around and just imposing their will on other people. But power has a few different sides to it because there's also authority and influence involved with power, and we're going to break those down here in just a second. I just wanted to point out a book where I really got a lot of this information from a long, long time ago, back when I was a political science student at the University of Wisconsin system. I was walking around the political science department one day, and they're giving out a lot of books or selling them for like $1. And I picked up this book called Power, Influence, and Authority by David V.J. Bell. And it's a great read that pretty much covers the topic that we're going to cover. I'm giving really more or less a summary of this book. It's a little bit of a complicated read. It's a short read, but this concept, this idea, this literature literally became the filter that I saw everything that was related to political science and politics, but it also became the filter that I saw a lot of things through life through, was this relationship that we have with one another, whether it be individual to individual or individual to institution, this relationship that we have with power, influence, and authority. So let me just really break down quickly the few sides to power. There's naked power, there's authority, and there's influence. So naked power, pretty self-explanatory, right? If someone holds a gun to my head and says to me, give me your wallet, I give them my wallet because that's an exercise in naked power where I'm concerned for my safety and I'm going to comply with whatever the person who's pointing the gun at me is asking because they're exercising naked power. Makes sense, right? You see naked government exercised all the time in our governments. But you know what, let's gloss over that because this is a political science lesson and it's not yet time to get political. That's for later classes. But when a bully threatens to beat you up on the playground to take your lunch money, that's a naked exercise of power. Pretty easy to understand, and that's really oftentimes what people think about naked power when they think about the idea of power. But what about authority? What about influence? Influence is also a way to exercise power. If you convince someone to change their mind about something, you are exercising your power of influence. You are influencing that person. If you're setting a good example and other people like the example that you set and they start to behave in a way that mirrors your behavior or a way that you're trying to influence them, you're exercising the power of influence. So that's much different than, pointing a gun at somebody and getting them to act. So influence is another side of power. And then there's also authority. And I think we all understand basically what authority is, where authority is a position that a person or an institution holds that that enables them to exercise power over other people. I think the obvious examples would be the police. They can arrest you on the street. I mean, if I see somebody committing a crime, I can't arrest that person myself because I lack the authority to do so. I have to call somebody with authority, and in this example, the police, and they are the ones who make the arrest. If I see somebody committing a crime and I know that they committed a crime, I do not have the authority to put them in jail or keep them in jail. That's what a judge does, because our society gives a judge the authority to put somebody in jail, and that's real power. To put somebody into prison uh, requires the physically putting someone in a cage. That's an exercise of power that only people with a certain type of authority may have. So that's an example of authority. Now, the interesting thing is naked power, influence, and authority, they all work in a vacuum or in a continuum with one another. That is to say that if you have naked power, you also have a certain amount of authority, albeit maybe unjust authority, but it's authority nonetheless. And you also have influence over people, albeit not the kind of influence where people are making willfully agreeing with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish or whatever power you're exercising over them, but you have authority and influence nonetheless. If you have authority, you do have some naked power at your disposal. Like going back to the example with the judge doesn't actually put his hands on you and throw you in jail, but the judge activates the police or the bailiff or whoever it is that does the physical lifting. So with that authority does come some naked power, and it does come with some influence, because by your judgments, a judge's judgments with that authority, they're influencing a decision one way or another. And of course, if you have influence over people, or if you have influence in general, I should say, that does give you a certain amount of authority and naked power as well. An example of that would be, say, a doctor. If I have a heart problem and I need a doctor, I'm gonna go to the individual that has the expertise that can help me out. I'm not going to go to my car mechanic because he's not going to have any influence over me in that situation. I'm going to go to the doctor because the doctor is going to have the education to tell me what my problem is, and he's going to be therefore influencing me. And there's some authority in that as well, with the title of being a doctor. And there's some naked power in that, because if I need the heart surgery, I'm going to pay him the money to do the surgery. So even though, and here's the point of the whole lesson here about power, naked power, influence, and authority are different sides to, are three different concepts by themselves, but they don't operate individually. They operate in a continuum. And when you get into political studies, and even when you look at your relationships with people, your relationships with institutions, these dynamics are always at play. And what you find out is there's really an infinite number of scenarios that play out within that paradigm. And I find it very fascinating. So, it's the first thing I think about when in the political context when I'm looking at current events. Who has the authority to do this? Are they exercising their authority? Do they have the power to do what they want to do? Do they have the influence to do what they want to do? There's all these kind of questions, all this kind of calculus pops into my head right away, and it acts as a filter through all political activities that I observe. So that's Power, Influence, and Authority by David V.J. Bell. Find that and check that out if you get a chance. Now, I just want to talk really briefly about the difference between formal and informal exercise of power. So, and the difference between an informal and formal construct. In politics and in law, and even in business, we have formal rules and regulations, and we have informal rules and regulations. Formal is what we would write down on a piece of paper as a formal doctrine, and we say this is the rules that we follow, this is our formal doctrine. Informal is what actually happens. And the best example that I can give on that really quickly is the speed limit, for example. Now, the speed limit in the law books is 65 miles per hour on Los Angeles freeways. But I can tell you by experience that you can pretty much drive 80 miles an hour anytime you want and not have anything happen to you. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure how fast you have to drive to get pulled over in Los Angeles. You can, if you know, drop a comment in the email and or drop a comment in the comments and let me know, please. So you got this dynamic of formal and informal rules and regulations, and that also plays a part in all politics. And every single one of these, or in every single lesson that we do here on out, it will involve, or it will have elements of this lesson with power, influence, and authority, and informal and formal constructs that you can apply to every lesson here moving out. So there's a reason this was the first lesson. It's the most important lesson. It's the filter that that applies to everything we'll be talking about from here on out. So this one's a little bit shorter, but it's the most important. It's number one. Thank you for checking out lesson number 1 in the political science video blog series here at Politics with Roger, and we'll see you for lesson number 2. That is Politics from the Right. Take care.